Humans always find a way to turn the odds in their favor. That thought lingered in Captain Hale's mind as he stood atop the rocky ridge, surveying the chaos unfolding below. Bright neon streaks from enemy artillery sliced through the night sky, their glow reflecting off the sleek surface of his exo-armor. It had only been 2 hours since their drop into hostile territory, but already the battlefield had plunged into disorder. Yet what unsettled him most was the eerie calm of his squad. No frantic yelling, no panic. Only the low hum of helmets and weapons, ready for whatever came next. Hale's visor fed him a steady stream of tactical data. Enemy forces highlighted in red, his squad's movements shown in blue. The Cyrex, the tall and pale-skinned aliens, were frantically trying to reinforce their defenses. He could see them, awkward, lanky figures darting around in confusion under the artificial lights. Their panicked attempts to regain control were futile. No one ever expected what was coming. Lowering himself into a crouch, Hale signaled his team to move forward. They reacted immediately, slipping through the shadows like phantoms. No orders needed, just instinct honed through countless battles on distant worlds. The Cyrex were about to experience the unique human talent, thriving in chaos. Garrett, the sniper, struck first. His rifle let out a silent pulse, dropping an alien sentry from 100 yards. No noise, just a soft flash of blue and another crumpled body. One shot, one kill. The Cyrex didn't even have time to react. Another pulse, another hit. Go. Hale breathed into his comms, and his squad sprang into action. What followed was swift and ruthless. The aliens, towering and slow, fired blindly into the darkness, their glowing green energy rounds lighting up the battlefield but hitting nothing. They were used to intimidating their foes through sheer size and presence, but humans thrived in chaos. Hale was already in the thick of it, rifle blazing, each shot precise as another Cyrex dropped. Their size made them easy targets. The ground crunched beneath his boots as he closed the distance to the next wave of enemies. Movement southeast, Garrett's voice crackled over the comms. Got it. Hale responded, scanning the smoky horizon. Through the haze, he spotted a group of Cyrex reinforcements, more organized but far too late. He signaled his squad again, and they repositioned smoothly, ready for another strike. They didn't need complex strategies, just precision and control. The neon flashes grew more intense as the towering Cyrex surged forward, casting long shadows over the scorched earth. On my signal, Hale murmured, tightening his grip on the rifle. 3 shots rang out in unison, each one dropping a Cyrex soldier before they had a chance to react. The humans advanced once more, capitalizing on the confusion. Hale's rifle barked, each round landing with lethal precision. The Cyrex may have had the advantage in numbers, but numbers didn't matter when the humans moved like shadows, striking from all sides. Then the ground shook beneath them. Something big's coming, Garrett muttered over the comms. Hale shifted his gaze to the right, and there it was, a towering monstrosity, 3 times larger than the other Cyrex, emerged from the gloom. Its thick, rune-covered hide glowed faintly, and armor plates gleamed under the eerie light. The smaller Cyrex scrambled back, clearing a path as the beast let out a bone-rattling roar. Stay calm, Hale ordered, steadying his rifle. Spread out. The creature lunged forward, claws slicing through the air with alarming speed. Despite its massive size, it moved with terrifying agility. But Hale saw its weakness, brute strength with no finesse. Garrett fired first, his shot detonating on the creature's shoulder, but it barely slowed. Another swipe came dangerously close to Hale, missing by inches. His squad darted around it, dodging the creature's attacks and firing in quick bursts. We need to bring it down. Fast. Hale growled into the comms. The beast lunged again, but one of Hale's men tossed a grenade. The small explosive sailed through the air and stuck to the creature's chest. The explosion rocked the night, sending fragments of armor and flesh flying. The creature howled in pain but didn't fall. Keep it distracted, Hale commanded, as his team laid down suppressive fire. The creature's attention remained fixed on the squad, its rage fueling its every move. That was exactly what Hale needed. Breaking away from the main group, Hale moved swiftly to the creature's flank. He spotted the gap in its armor where the grenade had hit, exposing raw, vulnerable flesh. Taking a deep breath, he lined up his shot. One precise hit would end this. He pulled the trigger. The round struck the exposed area with a sickening impact. The creature let out one final, anguished roar before collapsing, its colossal body crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. For a moment, there was silence. Only the distant sounds of retreating Cyrex remained. Enemy neutralized, Hale reported, wiping the sweat from his brow. But the victory was fleeting. More would come. There were always more. Prepare for reinforcements, he ordered, surveying the battlefield littered with alien corpses. His team didn't celebrate. There was no time. They regrouped, eyes already scanning the horizon, waiting for the next wave. And soon it arrived. Hale watched from the ridge as Cyrex transports descended from the sky, stirring up clouds of dust as they touched down. He counted 7 ships. Bigger group this time, Garrett remarked, adjusting his scope. Hale nodded, eyes narrowing. Let's get ready. They're catching on, Hale muttered, his tone calm despite the chaos. But it won't change anything. Time was slipping away. The Cyrex were regrouping, organizing under their commanders, but humans never gave their enemies that luxury. Hale quickly signaled his squad. Move out. Without hesitation, the team advanced through the remnants of the battlefield. Alien corpses were strewn across the ground, and the acrid smell of charred flesh mixed with the sharp tang of energy weapon discharges filled the air. They moved with purpose, their steps silent amid the wreckage. The first shots came just as the Cyrex were still disembarking from their transports. Hale's squad was already in position, rifles raised, picking off the aliens as they exited the ships. The Cyrex were larger, stronger, but the humans were quicker. The disorder worked in their favor. Garrett's well-placed shot detonated a transport's fuel cell, sending a fiery explosion into the sky. The blast ignited panic among the Cyrex ranks, and their lines faltered as they scrambled to regroup. Hale's team pressed the advantage. There was no pause, no hesitation. They moved like predators, their rifles lighting up the battlefield as they tore through the alien forces. The Cyrex attempted to retaliate, but their response was chaotic and unfocused. The explosion had thrown them into disarray, and that was where humans excelled. Hale ducked behind a shattered piece of debris, rising just enough to fire a burst that felled 2 Cyrex attempting to flank from the left. He glanced to his right, spotting Garrett perched calmly on higher ground, his sniper rifle firing with deadly precision. Each shot landed true, dropping Cyrex soldiers before they even had a chance to react. The rest of Hale's squad moved relentlessly, always in motion, flanking, repositioning, keeping the aliens on their heels. The Cyrex weren't used to foes like this. Hale understood their kind. They depended on their size and brute force, but humanity had long since learned that on the battlefield, speed and adaptability were what truly mattered. Suddenly, a volley of green plasma bolts screeched through the air. Hale hit the ground as the searing blasts whizzed overhead. They're regrouping. Dawson's voice crackled through the comms. I see it, Hale responded, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The Cyrex had managed to pull themselves together under the command of a towering Cyrex officer. The alien commander was barking orders, directing its troops into more cohesive formations. Their numbers were overwhelming, too many to hold off for long. If they closed the gap, we're done. Garrett's voice came through, tense but focused. Hale's mind worked fast. His team was elite, but even they couldn't hold against a force this large for long. He needed to break their momentum, and fast. His eyes locked on the enemy leader, a towering Cyrex commander whose presence was keeping the alien forces organized. If they could take it out, the rest would crumble. Garrett, take out the commander. Now, Hale ordered, shifting position to give the sniper a clearer line of sight. On it, Garrett responded, adjusting his scope with the calm precision he was known for. Hale watched as his sniper took the shot. A faint crack echoed, and the Cyrex commander dropped before it could even react, its body crumpling to the ground. The alien forces hesitated, their advance stalling as confusion rippled through their ranks. Push forward, Hale ordered, seizing the opportunity. His team surged ahead without hesitation, striking with swift precision. Plasma bolts lit up the battlefield, but the humans moved like a well-oiled machine, ducking, dodging, and weaving through the deadly barrage with practiced ease. Hale's rifle kicked against his shoulder as he took out 2 more Cyrex, adrenaline surging through him. There was no room for fear here, only focus and action. But just as it seemed they had the upper hand, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Hale looked up, spotting the dark silhouettes of more transports descending through the sky. They're bringing in heavy support, Dawson growled, his voice tense as the new dropships landed behind the initial wave. Fall back, Hale shouted. They couldn't face the incoming reinforcements head-on, not in their current position. Get to cover. The squad scattered, diving behind the smoldering remains of destroyed transports as plasma fire from the dropships peppered the ground, tearing it apart. Hale barely avoided a blast that scorched the air where he had just been. They were pinned down with no way forward. forward. "We won't last long under this fire," Garrett shouted through the comms. Hale clenched his jaw. He needed a plan, and fast. His eyes flicked to the burning wreck of the alien transport they had taken out earlier. The explosion had obliterated half of it, but the remaining fuel cells were still intact and dangerously volatile. "Dawson, Garrett, lay down, cover fire," Hale barked. "Daniels, you're with me." Dawson and Garrett opened fire, suppressing the enemy while Hale and Daniels bolted toward the wreckage. Plasma bolts rained down around them, but they pressed on, reaching the twisted ruins of the transport. They ducked behind the debris, catching their breath. "What's the plan, Captain?" Daniels panted, glancing at the still glowing fuel cells embedded in the wreckage. Hale didn't respond immediately, his mind racing. He quickly located the fuel cells, their glow flickering, dangerously unstable. "Help me set the charges," he said, pulling 2 explosives from his gear. Daniels' eyes widened as realization hit. "You're gonna blow the whole thing? We're still in the blast zone." Hale shot him a grin, eyes sharp. "Not if we're fast enough." They worked quickly, attaching the charges to the fuel cells while the rest of the squad kept the enemy distracted. Plasma fire continued to hammer down around them, but they stayed focused. "Charges are set," Daniels confirmed, stepping back. Hale activated the detonator, setting a 30-second timer. "Back to the ridge now. Move." They sprinted, weaving through the firestorm as plasma bolts screamed past, grazing the air. Neither man slowed, knowing the explosion would hit hard and fast. They barely made it to the ridge as the timer hit 0. A deafening explosion tore through the night, a massive fireball erupting from the wreckage, sending a shockwave that rippled across the battlefield. The dropships were caught in the blast, their sleek metal frames consumed by flames as they disintegrated in the inferno. Cyrex soldiers on the ground never stood a chance. Those closest to the blast were vaporized instantly, while the rest were thrown into complete disarray. Hale watched from the ridge, breathing hard, heart pounding. The battlefield below was a smoking wasteland, with scattered, broken Cyrex forces scrambling in the chaos. His squad had done it. They had turned the tide. "Status report," Hale rasped, his throat raw from the smoke and strain. "All clear," Garrett replied calmly. "They're retreating." Hale allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had bought precious time, but deep down he knew this wasn't over. The Cyrex would regroup, they always did. "Rearm and rest," Hale ordered, his voice steady despite the exhaustion settling over him. His men nodded in acknowledgement. There were no cheers, no celebration, just the shared understanding that this was only a temporary reprieve. The silence that followed was eerie. The Cyrex had pulled back, leaving behind a graveyard of smoldering wreckage and lifeless bodies. Hale and his team had set up a small camp on the ridge, quietly tending to their gear, checking rifles, cleaning weapons, and preparing for what would undoubtedly come next. "Think they'll come back tonight?" Dawson asked, his voice barely above a murmur as he checked his rifle for the 3rd time. "They're regrouping," Hale said, his eyes never leaving the dark horizon. The Cyrex were relentless, but humans had adapted to that long ago. They'd fought this war on dozens of worlds, each battle more intense than the last. And every time, they had found a way to survive. "They'll bring more next time," Garrett muttered, adjusting a strap on his armor. "They will," Hale agreed, his expression grim. "But so will we." The night stretched on, heavy with tension. The squad sat in silence, each man on edge, waiting for the next attack. Hale's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his gut instinct telling him the lull wouldn't last. Then it happened. A blinding flash of neon light ripped through the sky, followed by the distant hum of engines. Hale's heart sank as the scale of the threat revealed itself. "More ships," Garrett whispered, his voice cold. "And they're bigger than before." "They're here," Hale confirmed, rising to his feet and pulling his rifle from its holster. This was it, the final stand. He glanced at his squad. For men, tired and battered, but resolute. They were always ready. "Positions," Hale ordered. The team moved swiftly, taking up defensive spots around the ridge. Hale's fingers tightened on his rifle as the first Cyrex transports touched down, their massive landing gear shaking the ground. Hundreds of Cyrex soldiers poured out, more than Hale had ever seen before. But the numbers didn't matter. The humans would hold. They always held. The first shot cracked through the air, and the battle erupted once again. Hale's rifle spat death into the oncoming horde, each pull of the trigger taking down another Cyrex soldier. But the alien army surged relentlessly forward, their plasma weapons lighting up the night sky like deadly fireworks. "Stay sharp," Hale barked, his voice cutting through the chaos as he dropped 2 more with quick, controlled bursts. The Cyrex pressed on, their overwhelming numbers slowly forcing the humans back, but Hale's squad held firm, refusing to give in. an inch. Plasma fire screamed through the air, scorching the earth and kicking up dust and debris, but the humans stood their ground. The battle seemed to stretch into eternity. Hale's senses heightened. Every shot and movement felt with precision as he fought in sync with his team. They were a well-oiled machine, each member moving as part of a greater whole. Yet, despite their skill and determination, the Cyrex began to close the distance. Their sheer numbers were starting to take a toll. "They're too many," Dawson shouted, panic creeping into his voice as he fired desperately into the mass of advancing aliens. "We don't fall," Hale roared in response, his voice booming over the roar of battle. "We hold the line." He fired another burst, taking down 3 more Cyrex, but they kept coming. Then, a low, ominous rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Hale's eyes widened as a massive Cyrex war machine rolled into view from behind the alien lines, its twin cannons glowing ominously with energy. This was it, the final push. "Get ready," Hale shouted over the comms. "This is it, the final push." The war machine's cannons fired, sending a blast of energy ripping through the ridge. The explosion threw Hale to the ground, the force disorienting him as debris rained down. His ears rang, his vision blurred as smoke and dust filled the air. Dazed, he scrambled to his feet, shaking off the disorientation. He could still hear the distant sounds of gunfire and shouting, even over the deafening hum of the war machine's cannons. He wiped blood from a cut on his forehead, assessing the situation. The ridge was in ruins. His squad, though battered and bruised, was still fighting, but the Cyrex were pushing closer, closing in. Above them loomed the war machine, its cannons glowing, preparing for another shot. "We need to take that thing down," Hale shouted into his comms, his voice barely cutting through the noise of battle. Dawson, still laying down suppressive fire, responded with frustration. "How are we supposed to do that, sir? That thing's a fortress." Hale's mind raced. They were out of time and nearly out of options, but surrender wasn't in his DNA. His eyes scanned the battlefield frantically until he saw it, the war machine's power core, exposed for just a moment as the massive cannons reloaded. It was a weakness, but they would have to get close. "Garrett, I need a distraction," Hale commanded, already moving toward the wreckage of a downed Cyrex transport. "Roger that," Garrett replied coolly. A split second later, his sniper rifle cracked, the shot perfectly placed to take out a Cyrex officer standing near the war machine. The aliens hesitated, momentarily confused by the loss of their leader. It was the opening Hale needed. "Daniels, on me," Hale shouted, signaling to his remaining soldier. The two of them sprinted through the chaos, weaving between wreckage and dodging plasma fire as they raced toward the war machine. The towering behemoth loomed over them, its cannons almost ready to fire again, but Hale kept his eyes on the prize, the exposed power core. Hale and Daniels sprinted across the battlefield, dodging plasma bolts and explosions that tore through the ground around them. The very earth seemed to tremble beneath the heavy treads of the approaching war machine, and Hale could feel the intense heat radiating from its priming weapons. "Get ready," Hale shouted as they neared the monstrous vehicle. The power core was visible now, a faint glow beneath the layers of alien armor, vulnerable but only for a moment. They had one shot. Daniels gave a quick nod of understanding as they reached the cover of a fallen transport. Hale pulled out his last explosive charge and handed it to Daniels. "I'll cover you. You plant the charge." Daniels took the charge without hesitation. "On it, sir." As Daniels moved toward the machine, Hale unleashed a barrage of suppressing fire, picking off any Cyrex soldiers who dared approach. Plasma bolts whizzed by, the air crackling with heat, but Hale remained focused. His squad was counting on him. There was no room for failure. Daniels reached the war machine and began attaching the charge to the exposed power core. Time seemed to slow as the massive cannons above them rotated, locking onto their position. "Hurry up," Hale shouted, adrenaline surging as his heart pounded in his chest. Daniels finished placing the charge and sprinted back toward cover just as the cannons roared to life. The ground erupted around them, but they kept moving, ducking and weaving behind debris as the war machine fired again, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. "Now! Detonate!" Hale yelled over the noise. Daniels slammed his hand onto the detonator. The explosion that followed was immense. The war machine's power core erupted in a blinding flash, sending a massive shockwave across the battlefield. Hale shielded his eyes as debris and fire rained down. The alien machine let out a mechanical groan before collapsing, its immense metal frame folding in on itself as flames and smoke engulfed it. For a moment, the entire battlefield fell silent. The Cyrex forces froze, watching in disbelief as their seemingly indestructible war machine crumbled to the ground. Their morale shattered, and the tide of the battle turned in an instant. Hale stood, his breath coming in heavy gasps. Gene faltered under the human assault. The battle shifted in the human humans' favor as they methodically picked off the Cyrex soldiers, driving them back across the scorched battlefield. It wasn't long before the enemy broke completely. In a panic, the remaining Cyrex forces retreated, abandoning their fallen comrades and the smoldering wreckage of the battlefield behind them. Hale lowered his rifle, breathing heavily as he surveyed the scene. The ridge was a desolate landscape of charred earth, alien corpses, and shattered machines, but they had one. The war machine lay in ruins, and the once fearsome Cyrex were fleeing in defeat. Garrett and Dawson approached, bloodied but still standing. "We did it," Garrett said, wiping sweat from his brow, his sniper rifle still smoking from the battle. Hale nodded, his face hard but relieved. "We held the line." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the battle pressing down on them. Against impossible odds, they had survived, once again proving that, no matter the challenge, humans would find a way to endure. It wasn't the first time they had defied the odds, and it wouldn't be the last. Dawson's gaze shifted to the darkening sky. "We should fall back to base," he suggested, his voice carrying the weariness they all felt. Hale nodded. The Cyrex had been beaten today, but the war was far from over. The weight of exhaustion pressed on him, but rest wasn't an option. "Not yet. Move out," Hale ordered. The squad gathered their gear, stepping carefully through the wreckage as they made their way back toward the base. The fires from the battle still burned, casting flickering shadows across the devastated landscape. Hale paused for a moment, turning back to look at the battlefield one last time. The twisted remains of the Cyrex war machine loomed in the distance, a monument to the brutal fight they had just survived. Yet there was no sense of triumph in his heart, no pride in the victory. This was just another battle, another day in an endless war. But for now, they had survived, and in this war, survival was victory enough. The humans moved silently into the darkness, their armor catching the faint glow of distant flames as they disappeared into the night. Behind them, the Cyrex forces lay beaten and broken. The enemy would remember this day, a day when the humans had defied the odds once more, standing their ground against overwhelming might and crushing their enemy's greatest weapon. And across the galaxy, the message was clear. No matter the odds, no matter the foe, humanity would never stop fighting.